Right, so greetings, hello, welcome to the Philosophy Club here. Again, our first one after Christmas and New Year, here in little village of Betete, and for a change we're in the village library, which I thought would be fun to show my guests and viewers the library. It's, as you see, it's a sweet little library. I'm the librarian here in the village, and if you're local and you live near central France, do pop in. Yeah, what's not to like? So I thought we'd have it here for a change. It's been quite a week. Happy Christmas, first of all. I want to say Happy Christmas and Happy New Year. This is our first meeting of the Philosophy Club since then. And the wheel of Jera, as we say it in the runic alphabet, or Jera, is turning. That means the wheel of time. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we call that the Kala Chakra, the great wheel of time. It's a particularly esoteric Tibetan Buddhist teaching associated with the Dalai Lama. He gives initiations in that, and it's something I've studied for years. And so, time is sacred. We've just had a full moon, and so yes, may it be auspicious with you wherever you are in the world, in your family, with friends. It's been a difficult few years, I think, for the whole planet. I've been working very hard, my first bit of news, on my most recent autobiography, which I'm writing at the moment, which is covering the years 2018 up to 2025. And it's a very intensive work. I'm covering 10 days of that epic span of 7 years per day, so that's 10 days covered every day, and if I keep up this rate I'll be finished in early July next year. So I'm busy 10 days a day until early July. So I'm not going to be out and about much apart from that, but I'm sneaking out here to give the Philosophy Club meeting, and I am also doing admin and other stuff and enjoying life. And what have I been learning? Well, I really recommend people to write an autobiography because it's really interesting. When you keep track of your life and you look back on it, I keep a daily diary, which I do on a card index system, which is a system I learned from a French writer. Years ago, I was flying to Norway, actually, to see a friend, and found a book called The Art of Time in Heathrow Airport, which I thought that was interesting, scanned it and read it. And this guy had invented this system. He was the son of a famous French author. Jean-Jacques Servan-Schreiber was his father, who wrote a book called The American Challenge, which was read by all French intellectuals, saying, we've got to do something, America's taking over the world, Anyway, his son wrote this book about the art of time, and so every day, since I discovered it in 1991, I've been keeping a daily diary on the card index system. And at the end of the month, so every morning you write what you want to do that day, which I've done religiously ever since. And you make a list of 7 or 8 or 9, whatever things, and the timings, go shopping, whatever. It becomes a list that you carry around all day. And then and the next morning, you write up what you actually achieved, and you tick, yes, I did that, I didn't do that. And is the red light showing, as in it's recording, because that helps. Okay, good. Yeah, excellent. Technical department there. So, so the next morning you write up, honestly and realistically, what you did, and maybe of the 10 things you wanted to do, you only did 4 or 5.
Breaking the tape.
Sorry. And that's fine. I mean, then you carry them forward to the next day. So I didn't do that thing that I should have done. Okay, so you keep putting it on the cards till you finally get round to it. It's a really good discipline system, and it enables you to get everything done. Then at the end of that day, the end of that morning, you put it in the card index box under the date, 4th of January or whatever, and you start the new one for the rest of that day. And so it accumulates, and at the end of every month, you then have 31 days worth of cards, or 30, however many in the month. And what I do is I wrap them in a rubber band, stick them in a shoebox, and over the year I accumulate 12 months. And so then that's my year. Then I move on to the next. And I've just done this because I've just finished December, so now I'm on to January. Got a new box, The advantage of this system is I can now look back on every day in 2020 when I'm writing up my autobiography, and I know exactly what I was doing. So I just recommend, it's keeping track of one's life, thanks to the amazing invention of this French guy. I don't know if anyone else does this, but it really is a good system. I've tried to get my daughters to it, but sadly they wouldn't. Sophie, my daughter, kept trying and didn't do it. And now she's died, and so all her life story, her memories are gone when she dies, when a person dies. Their whole chronology, their whole evolutionary development goes with them. And that's, I think, what is the most difficult thing about death for me. So, in a sense, this is an invention that I use to fight against entropy and to fight against death. When I die, this will all be remaining. My friends or whatever can find, the story of my life. It's all there in narrative. And what I'm doing in the book is I'm summarising that. And in 2020, I was writing an important book called the Philosophiae Religionis Principia Mathematica, which was the sequel to Sir Isaac Newton's book, which was called the Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, which meant the mathematical principles of natural philosophy. So my book is a sequel to that, and it's the mathematical principles of religious philosophy. And I'm the first person to ever attempt it, first person to ever think it up. But to me it's absolutely obvious, because when I read Newton's book, he said, I've worked out how gravity works, I've worked out mathematical laws for it, but I haven't got a clue how it happens or why or what's behind it. I just know that it works according to these fractions and sums and formulae. But I think it's got something to do with God, he said, in the last chapter of his book. But that's a story for another time, he said. So anyway, when I read that in Cambridge some years ago, I thought, I better write that sequel, because nobody else is doing it. And I like mathematics. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not, an expert in all the ins and outs of mathematics, but I'm an amateur. And I love maths because it's ordered, and, once you get the formula, you know what you're doing. It's quite straightforward. And it's very, very powerful tool. So I'm saying let's use mathematics for thinking about ethics and religion and morality, and metaphysics and higher order types of questions, which most mathematicians, some mathematicians do think about that stuff, like the really good ones. Pascal thought about it a lot. Newton himself thought about it, Leibniz. Some of the really best mathematicians are interested in ethics and philosophy. And I'm hoping my book will appeal to them. I'm hoping it will be used by maths teachers in schools. I designed it when I was teaching philosophy in schools. It's full of, so it's a textbook, it's full of questions. You can work out the answers to difficult things. So this last week, I've been reviewing the work I did back in 2020. And I wrote chapters on relativity theory and mathematics, for instance, and religious mathematics. I'm looking back on it and thinking, wow, that was really interesting, Thomas. And for instance, I bet you don't know this, people that are listening, but what I discovered doing the research for that chapter is that Einstein's famous equation, E = mc squared, was not actually his invention at all. It's the thing he's remembered for. Every schoolboy knows that equation and Einstein. Actually, it was a totally different chap called Olinto de Pretto, 1857 to 1921, who was an Italian engineer, polymath, scientist, mathematician, who wrote a book about gravity and relativity theory, and he coined that equation. Now, historians of science, I'm merely a historian of science and a historian of maths, but it's pretty clear that Einstein read Olinto de Pretto's work because his parents had a house in northern Italy. He used to go there for summers. He was fluent in Italian. In the patent office in Bern, he would often get Italians submitting inventions because Italy is a multilingual country. They speak German, French and Italian. So he was fluent and he knew about Olinto de Pretto's work. And he pinched the equation, basically. And then so there are historians of science now accusing him of, like ungentlemanly behaviour, shall we say. And Poincaré also, he pinched some ideas from the great French mathematician and didn't credit anyone with these things. What was unusual about Einstein's papers in 1905, theories of relativity, is he didn't have any bibliography. He didn't reference a single other person's work, which breaks all the rules of science. There's one chap says, and I can't verify if this is true or not, there's one chap says that this was a time, 1905, a great tension between the French and the Germans for who was the top nation in Europe. And the Brits were obviously, well, they knew they were the top nation, they didn't even have to fight, but the French and the Germans were going for it. And it was being fought out in mathematics. So the greatest French mathematician, Poincaré, was in rivalry with the greatest German mathematician, Gauss, G-A-U-S-S. They were both geniuses, but they were publishing stuff, had to get it out first before he did. And the theory by this researcher who's gone into it is that Gauss he knew what Poincaré was doing. Poincaré had coined the phrase relativity theory. He had invented all these experiments with clocks on moving trains and thought experiments, what happens if you invented the basic logistics of relativity theory. Gauss knew all this and knew he was going to publish very soon. In fact, he gave a lecture about relativity theory. So Gauss, this is the theory. Gauss thought up this brilliant idea. Why don't we publish first? We, the Germans. And how will we do that? Well, I tell you what, and he had some friends who are connected with Zurich and Switzerland and German speakers, and they said, I tell you what, we'll write a paper which we'll send to this obscure guy called Einstein, who basically failed all his exams and had got a very low degree, and wasn't particularly bright, actually. And we'll palm it off under his name. And so we'll claim it as a German-Swiss discovery, because Einstein was also from Germany. He lived in Ulm and places. And that way we'll steal the thunder from Poincaré. So anyway, one historian has put that forward. In other words, it wasn't even Einstein's work. He just was the front name. Like Shakespeare didn't write his plays, he was just the name. I suspend judgment. I don't know. What I do know is that Olinto de Pretto invented the equation, and that Einstein must have known that. So what I like so from a perspective of religious maths, I revisit in the chapter on relativity theory and religious mathematics, I revisit all this stuff. I say, look, this is quite important actually, who actually invented relativity theory. Is it true? Or are there other kinds of explanations? So Olinto de Pretto was a believer in what he called the luminous ether. He didn't go along with Einstein's views. He wanted to explain gravity in a slightly different way. And I tend to be more on the side of Olinto de Pretto's theories, myself personally, with gravity, which are going back much more to Newton's ideas. But anyway, so revisiting this chapter, doing my work this week, it's fascinating to look back at all that stuff. And the thing is, these are unanswered questions. So in the textbook, I then write up the questions. I say, did Olinto de Pretto come up with the equation? Did Einstein knowingly steal ideas, etc., etc.? All I'll say is the jury's out, but that's what's so interesting about history, including in the history of science, because it's a bit like Jonathan Creek trying to solve the mysteries of what really happened in the past. So that's, and then there are other chapters I've been working on. That was just one. So very busy in my reflecting on my previous work, really, and thinking, what is religious maths, and can we not get? I mean, mathematicians are incredibly clever. They can research all kinds of details of stuff, compute, real world fluctuations and micro details of things, but it seems that we still cannot compute ethics, the difference between right and wrong. I mean, the general thing out there on the street is, well, it's a matter of opinion. If you think it's all right to go and rape a 80-year-old and rob her, well, that's your choice. Like, I'm in a gang too, we do that kind of stuff. So ethics has become optional. The boy whose neglect killed my daughter, has that kind of mentality. It's like, well, it's not my fault, she just died. I mean, that's karma, isn't it? She was dying anyway. I mean, it's not my fault, don't blame me. I mean, that's life, death. So my problem with all that kind of attitude is that, no, I think ethics should become a science. It should become as finely tuned a science as any other branch of knowledge. So that's what I'm doing the work on religious maths for. So that's the first thing I wanted to share because I think it's quite interesting. Any questions, comments? Because you had to do maths as a sailor, didn't you?
Yeah, both as a sailor and as an inventor as well.
Right.
I was working on much on Archimedes' works.
Okay. Yeah.
I built stuff for towing for seismic industry, survey industry.
Right.
Depresses and deflectors, and I had to
make sure they all work.
Both hydrodynamics as well as weight. One of my inventions was a towed instrument carrier that had a zero gravity in water, just plus 1 or 2 kilos, so that in case you snap the wire at the tow point,
yeah,
it would gradually surface.
Okay, so it couldn't sink.
Couldn't sink, but when you towed it, it started pressing itself down.
Right.
Like an otter.
And what sort of things was that for carrying? Was that a big thing, carrying stuff?
Yeah, the biggest one had a pressure of 1.5 ton down force.
Right, so
at towing speed of...
That'd be about half my library then.
3 knots.
Yeah.
Instrument carrier for hydrophones, for seismic industry, for sub-bottom sounders equipment, stuff like that.
Right. Because you've talked about that before, about very complicated microphones that can pick up stuff on the seabed and things. So towing that stuff out to the site and then putting them down there. That was your work, yeah, fascinating. And so the maths had to be all right, yeah, and all the pressures and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, good. I think the one thing I would say about, obviously maths and ethics overlap, is don't cheat the sums. I mean, if you invent stuff, you have to get it right, and otherwise people's lives and fortunes can go up in smoke. I mean,
we can go to Titan 2.
Yeah, and if you're doing rockets in space, you have to get the maths right. So the rule of maths is it has to be accurate.
Absolutely. And
it has to be true. It has to be truthful. Otherwise you're going to miss the moon when you fire the rockets off. And I think the same with ethics. I think the problem with people that think, well, ethics is just a matter of choice, subjective, there's no science to it. No, and therefore I can lie. I can use deceit, I can use bullying, I can force my opinions on other people that this is right because I've got the power to force that on you. That's all a fundamental error in religious ethics that's going on, in mathematical ethics. And we see it all over the world at the moment with, Putin, Netanyahu and Trump all trumpeting their their lack of a scientific approach to ethics. And so my response as an intellectual is to invent this field called religious mathematics. So anyone wants to study it, get the book and answer the questions, send them back to me. It's a textbook, use them in classes. If you're a teacher, whether a teacher of philosophy or religion or maths, use them in their textbooks. Okay, I want to move on to another little point here. It's quite an interesting point though. A friend of mine sent me a text accusing me of being an anti-theistic theologian. Am I an anti-theistic theologian? So I just want to respond to that. So anti-theistic means you're against theos, you're against theism. I think she meant, I'm against, well, my interpretation, what I've replied to her is, I'm against simplistic theism. I'm against the sort of, the conventional monotheistic faiths that say, well, there's one God and he's our God. And they've elevated their own nationalist or tribal mascot, which is the God of our people, the God of our language, God of our religion, to be the supreme God of the universe. They've confused the things.
The real guy.
They say, they say that our tribal God, of whatever that nation is or culture or religion, is the supreme Lord of the entire universe. And therefore we have the right to dominate, kill and destroy everyone else because their gods are only tribal deities. In fact, they're devils. St. Augustine said in the City of God that everyone who wasn't a Catholic and didn't believe in the Holy Trinity and didn't believe Christ was the Son of God come to save everyone through the sacraments of the church, and they were going on worshipping their own gods, they were all worshipping devils. Only the Catholic truth is not worshipping devils, but the truth. And then this became a justification for wiping out all the pagan religions of Europe, with the Crusades in the Baltic area, killing the last Lithuanian pagans and everyone else, and in Scandinavia, and then going all around the world, trumpeting this kind of theistic Trinitarianism, and saying they're all worshipping devils. Now, I'm not saying I'm not saying that by definition, all the cults that Roman Catholicism tried to suppress, like in the Aztec culture, didn't have some problems. Yes, they were doing human sacrifice. Yes, they were cutting out hearts, and yes, they were doing all kinds of unspeakable things. But I think the using of an oversimplistic theology to justify militarism and killing is an unjustified move. So my point is, I'm not an anti-theistic theologian. I'm a believer in authentic theos. So I do believe there is, hopefully, probably somewhere, an ultimate reality we can call theos. That's the Greek word for the deity. But I think it's going to be quite different to the average religious fanatic who believes that their religion is the only one. So, for instance, I've been working on my commentary on the Quran, on early Islamic culture, and there was a famous battle that didn't actually happen. It was an expedition right towards the end of Muhammad's life. He sent a bunch of troops from Mecca and Medina, an army actually, to go and fight against the Arab tribes that were supporting the Byzantine state and were Christian. And he promoted the idea that no, Islam has come now, this is the truth. I as a prophet supersede the others. So you have to join this military expedition and we're going to go and conquer the other people, like a military thing. I think this was a mistake. I don't think prophets should be leading armies and killing other people just because they're of a different religion. I think Muhammad lost the plot a bit at the end of his life after Khadijah left. And, if you don't believe me, listen to my commentary on the Quran, because it's a chronological commentary, first ever done. And it explains how I think Muhammad fell for the same mistake, arguably, that Maduro's fallen for, which is when you reach a certain level of power, you think you're indispensable. And you think that anyone trying to get you is like really evil. And you lose that ability to look at yourself, with a certain irony and a certain amount of humour. Strict Orthodox Muslims say of Muhammad, he never smiled, he never laughed, as if that's a good thing. Well, I don't think it is. I think that's sad. One has to laugh at oneself. So anyway, that's just a little aside. Now, I'm not anti-theistic, but I'm critical of simplistic theisms. And this is why I tend to be more comfortable with the pagan tradition, which was polytheistic, and which accepted the plurality of deities, the plurality of genders, the gods and goddesses, all are equally valid, and the different gods have different qualities, different aspects. In the Scandinavian culture, Thor is not the same as Odin. You need the strong one and the wise one. You need them both. Anyway, that's just a little response to a conversation I've been having. I thought it might be of interest. Right, let's move on. I want to share something, which is a book. Since we're in a library, I want to share this work of William Blake. And we're going to play the Druid game. You're going to open a page at random and find a picture or a poem and see what you make of it. Do you want to describe one of the pictures?
Yeah.
This one looks quite interesting. What's that?
It seems like a couple trying to get out of difficulties. I might be wrong, but it looks pretty.
Pretty scary, like they're trapped.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look. Right, so this is an absolutely superb book in French with original illustrations by William Blake, who lived in London in the sort of end of the 18th century and then died in the early 19th century. This is a couple of larger pictures from the same book. And this is a book he wrote about Europe, EUROPA. And I'll be absolutely honest with you, I've been a Blake fan for years. I was a friend of Peter Cadogan, who used to come to my philosophy classes years ago in London. I'd never heard of this book, EUROPA. I didn't know Blake had written. It's one of his epic poems, right? And he's talking about the soul of Europe and how we can set her free from oppression. Arise, my son, bring all thy brethren, O thou king of fire. Prince of the sun, I see thee with thy innumerable race, thick as the summer stars. But each ramping his golden mane shakes, and thine eyes rejoice because of strength, O furious king. It's a superb illustration series. It's called Europe, or Europa, a prophetess, or a prophecy. There's a copy of it in the University of Glasgow library, which I used to be a reader at, and it'll be upstairs on the top floor in the rare manuscripts division, which I've been to. I didn't know it was there. So Blake is so interesting because he was a dissident at the time when Britain ruled the waves, Britannia ruled the waves. He identified with the oppressed people of the world, and he identified with the Druid community. We regard him as a proto-Druid or an actual Druid. He wanted to reconcile all the religions of the planet. Judaism, he wasn't anti-Jewish, he wasn't anti-anything, but he wanted the esoteric convergence of all the wisdom traditions. And he thought that the official churches and synagogues and mosques and all the official bigwigs kept people's genius suppressed because you had to follow certain rules, you had to stick in this certain groove. And his work as a poet, as an artist, was to set people free from this inner oppression. I mean, he was look, here's another illustration, same book. This is amazing, like a chap on a flower with his lady love. Like, my daughter Sophia would love these paintings.
Couple on a lily.
A couple on a lily, yeah. So this is why art is so important, why someone like Blake is so important, because their imaginative work sets us free to dream and to think anew how we can remake the world. He's usually classified as a romantic in terms of, if you have to define him in art history. Here's his version of the judgment of Adam. There's God, ticking off Adam for eating the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and getting thrown out of the garden. So a lot of his mythology is based on. And here's a beautiful painting. I mean, this is an example of Blake's finest work, really. This is Adam calling each beast by its name, giving the names to the animals in the garden. And here's Satan tempting Eve, flying over her in serpentine form as she's sleeping. So he takes all these archetypes, these things that are in people in the collective religious imagination, but he always puts a new twist on them. He felt that Albion, Britain, has a special destiny. It's the place where truth has to come back. He was fed up with science. He actually didn't like Newton, so I think he didn't realise that Newton was actually also a great romantic, and that what he was trying to do with science was to do what Blake was trying to do with the arts, to revive, revivify society. Newton was trying to do it with precision and mathematics and science. Blake was trying to do it with poetry and art. But I think really they're both in different parts of the Heavenly Library. Also Petworth House, which is where I used to live in West Sussex. The owner of Petworth House was a patron of Blake, and he used to go down there and do paintings and drawings. There's some original stuff there in Sussex, worth seeing. So anyway, homage to Blake, really. And one of the beauties of meeting here in the library is we've got all these books around us. If you come and visit, you can look at them. They're exquisite. Yes. Okay. Any questions? Comments?
No, but I think William Blake was onto something. Something that maybe the churches, the Catholic Church, all the churches, all the religions all the world, you should basically behave properly.
Yeah.
And for example, the Islam is one thing, but did Muhammad really mean that everybody should knock off several times a day and go into a house and start praying?
Apparently, yeah. I mean, it could be quite short, but yeah, you should have these little prayer interludes. Yeah. I mean, two of them are at night, one first in the morning, so actually only two during the working times. Yeah. And I don't see what's wrong with having a little break twice a day.
Smoking break.
Yeah, effectively, or they call it prayer break.
No? They call it prayer break.
Yeah.
But also you have to face towards Mecca.
Well, officially, and yet there is the irony that in the very beginning of Islam, you didn't face Mecca, you faced Jerusalem. So it was Muhammad that had a revelation that no, we're going to stop facing Jerusalem. This was when the Jews were not accepting him as a prophet. Up to that point, he was going to, liberate Jerusalem, and all the Jews were going to love him. He was the new prophet. And then when they said, no, you're a fake, he said, well, to hell with that, we're going to face Mecca. So there are, it's not easy being a prophet. It's very difficult.
Must be
Politics.
a hell of a job.
It is a hell of a job because, not that I know because I'm merely a scholar, but I've studied prophets long enough to know that they have, turning points in their lives where they're tested.
Yeah.
And in fact, in my book on religious maths, there's a whole chapter on prophets.
Yeah, but what I mean is that he was onto something. He didn't really, the way I see it, the way you explained William Blake,
Yeah.
is that he didn't see that you needed to be inside a special
Building
type and sit down there and be talked to.
Yeah, and he was much more of a nature based,
Yeah.
and that's what makes him more of a druid. There is just a slight interesting little aside here, which is that he was baptised in the Church of England in the font of St James's Church in Piccadilly, which is a church I know and love well, right opposite the Royal Society of Arts, in near the statue of Eros, in Piccadilly. That was one of my favourite parts of London when I lived there, and I used to go to that church a lot. I knew the vicar there, a man called Reverend Donald Reeves, who was a very creative kind of Anglican, a bit like me, and he would introduce Druid type stuff into the prayers and things. And it was because of that vicar and that church I was eventually, and the William Blake Society, which I was friends with, which was based in that church. I went to the LSE, where I was studying at the university, and I gave them a Blake Society flyer. I said, "Can we put that up in the window, please?" And the chaplain said, "Yeah, fine, come in. Who are you?" "I'm Thomas. Hello, I'm studying international history, etc." Got talking. And we got on very well. And he said, "Have you ever been baptised, Thomas?" And I said, "No, never got round to it. I'm with Blake. I believe in worshipping the trees and the fairies and the woods and all that." "Well, I'm doing a couple of baptisms. I think you ought to be baptised, Thomas. We're doing a couple next month in the chapel at King's College across the road. Well, can I put your name down? Would you like that?" I was about 28, 27. My parents never had me baptised. They thought I'd come to it later if I wanted. Anyway, I thought about it a lot, and I thought, well, why not? I do believe in all this stuff. I am a person of faith. I'm on the side of the angels. I want to be counted. And if that will get me into the heavenly library, it's worth a bit of a sprinkling of water on my forehead. That's how I reason. As Pascal said, if it's worth the effort. So I agreed, and we had a baptism, and that was all because of William Blake. So that's ironic, isn't it? He was an Anglican, and so am I, but I don't think you could call us orthodox. But anyway, that's just a little personal aside. But I think, yes, you're right, he was onto something. Now I want to share another poet, Victor Hugo. This is another book here in this library. Now Victor Hugo, we all know, was a great novelist, Les Miserables, the longest running show in London, musical. He thought of himself mainly as a poet. Victor Hugo was a very interesting man, and we have here in the library his collected poems. His father was a general in Napoleon's army, and a very successful one, General Hugo.
Hugo,
they would say in French, yeah. And a freethinker and a Freemason and an intellectual, like most of the Napoleonic officers. And they were trying to build a republic of equality for all humanity and bring culture and the arts and all that. Freemasonry was important to them. It was a sort of ritual theatre of human advancement. So you do your rituals, but you had to pass tests, you had to give talks. And you still do in the Grand Orient in France. It's like a university of spirit. Anyway, Victor Hugo, the young boy, was raised by his mother because the general kind of lost, after Napoleon lost Battle of Waterloo, things weren't very good for the old generals. They all took a nosedive, and so it was his mother that raised young Victor. And he wanted to become a poet and a writer, very romantic, and I've been studying his poems, you know, to a young girl, in the ruins of Montfort-l'Omarie, The Voyage, etc. And in the second volume, which I've actually got at home, his two greatest poems he left unfinished. One was called The Ending of the Devil, The Defeat of the Devil, and it was a very long poem that he left unfinished at his death. He spent 20 years writing it and he never completed it. And I've been reading it, and it's really, really interesting. It's like, Paradise Lost by Milton. It's the French equivalent, What Happened with the Devil. But he's brought the story right up to modern times. And where is the devil now? And so I'm thinking, if I have time, I'm going to finish that poem for him. Because I think it deserves to be better known. It's a good poem. I mean, it's epic, but it's very intelligent. And his argument is that there isn't such a thing as a being called the devil. There isn't a kind of a chap there somewhere flying around with horns and hooves. No, the devil is ignorance, which lives within all of us. Ignorance which becomes cruel, which becomes malicious, which becomes violent. You know, that ignorance is everywhere. Sadly, it's in all of us. And what Victor Hugo says is that gradually, through learning, education, science, the arts, poetry, music, that ignorance will abate. And he believes that republican forms of government, ushered in by the various revolutions, were a big defeat of the devil. Because the devil works on elitism. You know, like, I'm Trump, I run everything, I do what I want, I say what I want. That's diabolic in Hugo's mind. It's democracy is a defence against diabolism in Victor Hugo's mind, because that's when the poor get a vote. That's when the disenfranchised, the marginalised of history matter, because they get a vote too. So in his mind, in his poem, the devil is defeated by the advancement of democracy, science, education, and learning and the arts. And I think that message is important. I didn't know this about Victor Hugo till I came to this library and found his poems. So I'm taking upon myself to finish that poem in French, because it's beautifully written. The French is exquisite. So, what do you think? Is that a good project?
Well, if you got the time.
If I've got the time, yeah. That's my summer vacation. I'll go down to Cannes or somewhere in the south of France and write the poem.
Yeah, it's going to be hot during the summer.
Yeah, but then I can sit under the palm trees and write the poem, can't I?
My
Nice.
wife and I came down to a small town called La Ciotat in the south of France in the beginning of July.
Okay.
We'd challenged and won over the Alps on our motorbikes.
Wow, you'd ridden across the Alps on bikes.
Yep. And came down via Italy and we had a great trip. But the last day from Grenoble and all the way down to the coast on Route Napoleon was pretty hot.
Yeah.
And in full leathers and safety equipment, of course, as one do carry on.
On bikes. Yeah, I won't be doing that. I'll get a train.
And we'd booked on a hotel which we used a bit in the business down there, called Hotel Oste, and it was right at the plage.
Oh right, on the beach.
On the beach.
Amazing.
And we just parked the bikes,
Stripped off and went in the sea.
And ran across the little road and straight out the sea.
That must have been nice. Yeah.
That was the best day of all.
Yeah. Yeah, well my mother used to take our family down to the south of France every year when I was little, growing up in Brighton. And that was one of the high points of my year. I loved going to France, and we would get the train all the way from Dieppe through Paris, stop in Paris, change for the Côte d'Azur Express, which left at midnight, and then it's an all-nighter, and you wake up and then you can see the sea.
I've
great.
I've done Paris to Marseille on TGV. That goes fast and quickly.
Yeah, this is in the 60s. They were bumpy old things. And we had couchettes, But it was really exciting for a young boy. So anyway, that's Victor Hugo, bless him. And then we come to, I want to mention also another poet, actually, who's called José Martí, who was Cuba's most important poet, and I've just been discovering him this week. I run this order of poets of peace and bards and druids, and I've given lectures in various places and presented my poetry. And I'm very concerned that poets should speak out for peace, and that's what Victor Hugo was doing. That's why I resonate with him. And also this guy, José Martí, as well. He's regarded by the Cubans as their great intellectual. He was also a philosopher as well as a poet, like me, and he had been arrested. He was a young boy growing up in Cuba at a time when the Cubans were beginning to talk about independence. They wanted to get away from Spanish rule. But it was dangerous, because if you were seen speaking in a cafe about you want to get away from the King of Spain, they're all wicked Europeans, you could be arrested. And he was, at the age of 16, put in prison for some little protest he'd done. And then he was shipped off to Spain and sent to school there, thinking it would grow him up and he'd become more respectful of the Spanish crown. It had the opposite effect. He decided, but it gave him the intellectual tools to know how to defeat the imperialist powers that were. And he then went to live for a time in Venezuela. He visited London, and he mingled with all these radicals, socialists. It was the time of, the end of the 19th century, people looking for alternatives to conventional, conservative, everything's fine, leave it as it is attitudes. And he went back to Cuba, knowing he might be arrested and stuff. But he went back to join or foment a kind of revolution. He thought it was time to actually resist Spain and rise up. Now, and a typical romantic gesture, so he joined the underground resistance army, right? This is where I don't agree with him. I part company with Mr. Martí, because he was recruited into a regiment of revolutionaries hiding out in the hills. And they had to fight a battle against the hard-trained Spanish armed forces. They were just a bunch of raggedy-tangly kind of maverick army. Under-equipped and all the rest of it. And it was the first ever battle he was ever in. It was called the Battle of Don Rizos, I believe. And he thought it was all very romantic. The commander of the rebels said, no, there's no way we can win again. They're there in an impregnable position. There's hundreds of them. There's a few of us. He sent a man on horse to tell Martí to come back and stand down and not attack, because he was in the vanguard. And instead, Martí, when the guy on the horse came to tell him the message, come back, he said, come on then, let's charge. And he made him and this other chap, who was a young boy, charge the entire Spanish armed brigade. And they were shot down, and Martí died. That was his first ever battle, his first ever charge.
First and last.
His first and last. And now he is the great martyr of the Cuban people. There's a big statue to him.
It was a bit early.
A big statue to him in Havana, and there's an armed guard marching up and down in front of his body all the time. He's like the hero of Cuba. I like the fact that he's a poet, but as I said in my Christmas letter, I said, if I'd have been there, I would have stopped him. I would have said, poets write, don't fight. The way to resist evil is, in my opinion, not to pick up a gun or a sword and fight physically. You should fight with your pen and with your mind. instead Marty died he was 40 or something. He could have lived on and done a Victor Hugo for Cuba. He could have carried on and written his plays and poems, and so it was a loss. And that leads me on to the next point, which I want to talk about Venezuela, because that's in the news a lot, with Trump going in and capturing the leader of Venezuela, Maduro, with a sneaky attack. What does one think of this? Well, one thing that I think about it, which is interesting, I've been doing some research, is that Cuba is very much involved with Venezuela. There's several thousand, 30,000 Cuban experts advising Maduro's regime, keeping it going. And Cuba really needs Venezuelan oil to keep itself going. So they're not going to be very happy about what Trump's done. And this reopens the whole can of worms about America and Cuba. Is Trump going to try and attack Cuba next? And if so, what on earth's going to happen? Discuss.
A new Bay of Pigs?
Well, yes. I mean, I think this is stupid. And I think once you open up the can of war, once you take up the sword, it's very hard to know how you put it back down.
I think come next week, and the Congress and the House gets back and start doing work, I think they probably really go do some emergency work, because what's been taking place on that side of the earth is absolutely insane and mad. Do the American politicians, US politicians, want to go down in history as a bunch of lunatics? I don't think so. A lot of them have got brains, but some of them have decided to just put that brain activity on pause for about 3-4 years.
Yeah.
That's how it seems to the rest of the world. They pride themselves that they are the leaders of the world. No, they are not. They are the laughing stock of the world. They've been led by a clown down the totally wrong alley.
So this is a Norwegian European perspective, summing up on this episode, and I think you'd have the vast majority of Europeans and British and French all agreeing with that analysis. They might put it more diplomatically, but what Starmer has said, right? So what Starmer has said is he doesn't have enough evidence yet to know what if he's going to absolutely denounce this. People criticise that position and say, look, you're not allowed to attack other independent sovereign nations. Just go in and capture the sitting president of a sovereign nation and a UN member. It breaks all the rules of international law.
It certainly does. Well, I'm not defending Maduro for his work, because that has also been very, very questionable.
Problematic, should we say? Yeah.
But after all, he still is the president of the country. And you can't just go in and pick a president and take him to your own country and try to convict him for
it shows a certain arrogance, let's face it.
Fantasy crimes.
Yeah. It's an arrogance by America. This is the most generous way of describing it, which has always thought that Latin America is its sort of plaything. Kissinger doing the coup in Chile. They've invaded other countries before. They were Panama, Grenada. The Monroe Doctrine was hands off Latin America. It belongs to the US. But there are an awful lot of people in Latin America who don't agree with that. And I think they have certain rights as to
most of them, I think. Yeah,
they have a right as to say what goes on in their country. And I don't think it does much good for the image of the US in the world. If America's stands for anything, I would have thought it should stand for international rules, international norms. The UN is headquartered there, which is the body that's supposed to support these what's called multilateral approaches to human problem solving. And it's like a maverick approach that's just taken over.
It's horribly dangerous.
That's the other thing, that it sets a legal precedent. So if Putin, God forbid, were to go and, conquer or just do a Trump into one of the neighbouring countries he doesn't like, let's say.
Could be Norway.
Anyway, it could be Norway, it could be Estonia, it could be unlikely to be a NATO country, it could be Armenia, or somewhere where there's an independent guy that's doing stuff he doesn't like. It could even be Ukraine he could try for. Well, then he can turn around and say, well, you did it, I'm just doing the same. And I think that has dangerous precedent, is set.
Kim Jong-un could be going south.
He could go and attack the South Korean. I mean, it's taken us thousands of years to get to the idea of international law, and that we should have international relations governed by laws, things like the laws of the sea. You can't just do piracy at sea anymore. There are consequences.
Well, it seems like the American leadership don't think so anymore. You can do whatever you want if you're American.
Well, so, okay, just to put my British hat on for a second here, a historical fact that most people don't know, which I will share at this point, is that George Washington was very nearly arrested as a war criminal earlier in his military career because he worked in the British Army, which was the colonial army that ran the colonies. He was recruited to the regiment and he served as an officer. And he was one time sent off on a mission by the colonial governor to go off and capture a French fort. I think it was called Fort Duquesne, somewhere up in towards the Great Lakes region. He had a small force, I don't know, 500,000 men or something. And he was supposed to capture the fort, and it was needed for the geostrategy of the French-English conflict in the New World. What Washington did was he offered to have a truce, a parley. They were well entrenched. He couldn't really. It would take months to capture the fort. He offered them to come out under a flag of truce, white flag, to parley. It's the laws of war, right? But when the commanding officer came out, he shot him in cold blood under the white flag and killed him, and a couple of others. And then they charged the fort and captured it. Now that was totally against every single rule of war in the 18th century. Still is. And yet Washington personally was involved in that. Now, when news of that got back to the commanding colonial governor, he referred it to London. And it was discussed in cabinet. Should this crazy maverick officer be court-martialed? What on earth was he doing? He's really annoyed the French. The French were kind of sending, I don't know what they sent, wood pigeons to London protesting, saying this guy deserves to be hung. He's broken the rules of war. He should be court-martialed. Do something. And it was touch and go. They nearly sacked him and put him in jail for breaking that truce. They decided in the end not to, because he was quite good at his job. They let him go by with a warning. And then, we know what happened. He became the commander of the rebel army. I've written a film script about this incident and Washington's early life, because not only did Washington do this war crime, he also was working in the pay of the Virginia gentlemen that wanted to break the treaty with the American Indians, the other side of the Appalachians. The British had captured Quebec. We took over an agreement that the French had signed with the American Indians. We wouldn't colonise their lands anymore. We were happy with the seaboard and the St. Lawrence River. We didn't want to go west and capture the rest of the Indian territory. We'd made an agreement. God gave you those lands, you can keep them. We'll build the odd fort and we'll trade with you. And that was the French agreement. And the British took that on. The Americans didn't like that agreement because they wanted more land. They wanted an excuse to cross the Appalachians and capture the Indian territory. And they hired Washington because for a living he was a surveyor, to kind of survey the potential of those lands. And then when the revolution broke out, they used it as an excuse to break the treaty with the Indians. They said, because we're now free, we don't have to obey the treaty of the allowing the Indians their territory. And thus the USA was born as a land grab against the Indians, led by a war criminal. So I'm just saying, wouldn't it be great to make a movie like that? I think Oliver Stone would probably direct it, showing the revolutionaries for what they really were, which was, excuse my language, a bunch of thugs that didn't believe in ethics. Discuss.
Why are they back today?
So seeing them, the descendant of this war criminal in his city called after his name, just going and arresting people in any country he fancies. I mean, that's what they do. Yeah. That's what war criminals do. But it would be interesting to make that film, because it's not the normal story that's told about Washington. The PR is that he was the truthful, honest, decent Joe, kind of best guy ever.
Flag.
Yeah, salute the flag and all that. But actually the whole thing is fake if you actually look into it, as a historian. As we Canadians know, I'm just saying this is common knowledge in Canada.
Yeah, it's...
Mark Carney knows the story.
Will not go down in the Trump-Kennedy Center library, I guess.
Well, I think that particular dream of... I don't think any artists are ever going to perform in that place as long as it's got
they can't
Trump's name on it.
Council head over here.
It's just... So I think my only comment here about... that's the background to what's going on. Some of the deep history. I only hope Maduro gets good lawyers. I hope he's given a fair trial. I hope he can speak in his trial. He can defend himself. He can... Because I've heard him speak at the UN General Assembly a couple of times.
Yeah, we also heard the other guy speak there.
Maduro is far and away more intelligent than Trump. He's articulate, learned. He knows about the history of Venezuela and Simón Bolívar, the great Latin American revolutionary. He identifies with that tradition. He's not a Marxist. He doesn't need to be. He's a Latin American revolutionary in the tradition of Martí and Bolívar. Yeah. I don't think Trump has ever heard of any of these people. So it'd be interesting to see the court trial. And I just hope that he's not shot or killed or disappeared before
or commit suicide, like Epstein.
Or commit suicide before he gets to trial, when he can speak about what's really going on here. I'd like to hear his side of this story.
I think they can't shoot him. I mean, it's too public. It's too public. Even Trump can't be that stupid.
Well, come on, they shot Oswald, in plain daylight.
Get somebody down to do it.
And they dropped Osama bin Laden at sea so we couldn't discover his body.
His whereabouts.
Couldn't hear his side of the story. I'd love to see Osama bin Laden on trial, hear his side of the story. But no, suspend judgment. I mean, there's a woman I greatly admire called Anne Applebaum, who's a very good commentator in American intellectual circles. She's a friend of Tim Snyder, who I greatly respect. They're very vocal about what's been going on in Ukraine. And Anne really doesn't like Maduro. In her book on dictators, recently published, she really goes for him and says he's been squirreling millions away that belong to the...
He's not a nice man.
So, I trust Anne Applebaum's assessment. I'm not an expert in. But at the same time, I think surely there should be more legal ways of dealing with these problems. Yeah. When you take out the gun to resolve the problem, it shows that you've intellectually lost the argument. I don't know. Discuss.
Yeah, you lost it before you started.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens in the trial. Let's just hope it comes to pass.
Maybe.
Yeah. So I noted, as I say, that both Europe and France and the UK are all saying the same thing, which is this shouldn't have been done in this way. One should observe, rules and law, because otherwise, how can we grumble at Putin invading Ukraine,
Yeah, that's
or Netanyahu
slaughtering? That's the danger
slaughtering?
with it, isn't it?
Yeah. we can't grumble at Netanyahu slaughtering Palestinians because, hey, you know, we do the same. No, I don't accept that argument.
Well, when it comes to Netanyahu slaughtering the Palestinians, I guess it goes the other way then. That Trump could say, well, he can do it, so can I.
Yeah, but that's the danger. We've got madmen running the world.
Yeah, no, you've got
I can't believe it.
China go for Taiwan, probably.
Well, this is...
However, they do protest, and they want to call emergency meetings at the Safety Council.
Yeah, I believe the Security Council are having a meeting. Russia and China are backing it. So let's watch what happens in this coming
America,
week.
USA will veto it.
And because of the structure, they can do that. So the other thing I want to announce in relation to this is my friend Professor Glenn Martin, who I've known since the 90s, and who, with him, we both run Philosophers of Peace globally. I'm the vice president, he's the president. He just had a meeting in Pondicherry in the south of India of the World Parliament and Constitution Association. It's called the Provisional World Parliament. And people gathered from all over the world, passed some regulations. It's like a kind of emerging world parliament, a totally democratic structure. He's the president of this group, and they've passed some very good stuff down in India. It's going to have a permanent secretariat in Bangalore, and it's really well done. So well done to Glenn and his colleagues. Some of them are quite well known, legal jurists and, you know, activists for world order and peace and justice. And so that's really good that they've been doing that. I hope it makes a difference. I know that Glenn Martin was in Venezuela about a year ago, meeting people, so I'll be interested to hear what he thinks of this Trump antics in Venezuela. And I hope he'll speak at the next meeting of the World Intellectual Forum later on, once we get it together, probably in February now. Another thing I want to mention before we wrap up with our final things is a disturbing thing. A friend of mine has sent me from Australia. She's an Irish student teacher. She's just finished her PhD actually, and is from Northern Ireland, but keeps her pulse on the whole thing, although she now lives in Australia and has done for many years. She sent me a thing from Steve Bannon, the kind of neo-fascist guy behind Trump, who has gone public and said he's going to set up the Irish National Party. He's going to create basically a neo-fascist movement in Ireland, because he's Irish-American. Yeah. And he wants to create an island of the black shirts, you know, that will support all the extreme right-wing stuff he's doing all over Europe.
I think he'll meet resistance on that in Ireland.
So I'm just saying, Steve Bannon, get a life. You know, you're not welcome in Europe or Ireland. And I have lots of friends in Ireland. It's a neutral country. It believes in peace and non-aggression, non-violence. It would never support the kind of stuff that Trump does. And it's also not a fascist country. I mean, there was a small fascist movement back in the 30s, you know, but it's long gone. And what Ireland believes now is democracy and multilateralism, and it's a member of the European Union, and it's going to stay like that. And so I'm hoping that we're going to set up the European Peace Agency in Dublin. As people may know, I've got this proposal from the European Space Agency. So I don't think Steve Bannon would comprehend what we're trying to do and why peace matters to Ireland. We don't want people to come and start stirring up racism and anti-multiculturalism, which is the rhetoric of Steve Bannon and his MAGA cronies. Ireland is very happy, you know, as a deeply caring, compassionate, genuinely Catholic nation, but which is also comfortable with its pagan and Druid past. And, you know, I have lots of Druid friends in Ireland, so as the peace Druid of Britain and Ireland, I would say hands off, Mr. Bannon. You're not welcome. And I just want to comment that I think nationalism, the idea of creating an Irish National Party, is his words. Nationalism is so passé we live in a small little planet. We should be doing internationalism and learning how to share and care for this world together. Not, I mean, this is the problem I have with Netanyahu, the nationalist wing of Zionism, which isn't big enough to realise that, no, working out an interfaith harmony for the Middle East is what we need to do. Christians, Muslims, Jews living together, and secularists. That's the way to go. So anyway, just Steve Bannon. No, thank you. We're not buying that particular product. Can you go back to jail, please? I thought you were in jail. This is what I don't understand. He was convicted of fraud. So I think he just needs to go back into jail, really.
Yeah, a lot of people that have been released lately should be back in.
Yes, yes.
Hernandez, they asked for him to stay behind bars until the end of his life.
Who's that?
The ex-president of Honduras.
The guy that Trump just released.
Yeah.
Has he asked to stay in prison
He
for safety?
hasn't asked, but the people in Honduras.
Oh, they've said keep him in jail.
Yeah, he should be there until after his death.
Oh dear, it's crazy, isn't it? So just to finish, just open the Norwegian dictionary around and teach us a word, because this is your expertise. We were looking at a word before, meaning non-violence. Ikke vold, is it? Ikke vold. What's the word for today?
Stå.
Stå.
Stå. Not with an L. S-T-O.
Just S-T-O.
Or with an A.
Oh, the O with a line in, is it?
No. The A with a ring over it.
Okay, S-T-A with a ring on the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does that mean then?
Or stå means stand.
Okay.
Stå upp, stand up. Or grind to a standstill.
Okay. Stå, it must be related to stop.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Ståsted. This is my point. Whether you stand there physically, or it can also be your absolute opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stå.
Ståsted.
Right. So it has many different varieties of meaning in it.
Yeah. And the stålampa, a lamp that stands.
Okay, a standing lamp type of thing. Yeah, I've got one that bulb's gone from my mother.
Yeah. And stå hej, noise.
What does that mean?
Noise.
Noise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stå hej. Fuzz.
So what let me just share some etymological, can I just have a look? So this is interesting because when I was writing the Kabbalah runes and researching etymology, going deeply into all languages, I discovered these core semantic sound scapes. And this sto sound is in many languages, Indo-European languages, and I discovered that they're all interconnected. So it's in the word study. A study is the place you sit still and you study. To study, you have to come to a stop. You can't be running around like a 3-year-old, not breaking stuff and causing mayhem. You have to sit still.
I've been doing stud welding.
So studying is related to the word to steady, steadying, which means, again, fixing your balance, steadying yourself. Only then can you learn. It's also related to student. Student is someone that can do that stilling, and it's related to the word still, stillness. So it's, to me, it's a sacred sound, sta, right? And when I was in my 20s and starting out on this research, I would make these word trees with sta, and then I'd have all the things like star is another word from that, because it's the fixed thing we look up in the sky that's always there, around which we revolve, and it's a star. So
A star to steer by.
yes, the stars by which we steer. So anyway, thank you for that. Store. I like that word. I'll put that in the dictionary. Great. Okay, let's finish with a poem then. Because I brought the book of poems. I didn't bring my tarot to the library, sadly, but another time we can do them. Okay.
When spring comes.
When spring comes, yeah. Yes. Now, well, this is quite interesting. This is a poem I wrote during my teaching career, when I was teaching, in schools with sometimes angry and difficult children in Britain. And this is an imagined conversation that happened in the class, in the staff room. So often we teachers would, when break came, if we weren't on break duty, we'd all go and retreat to the staff room and have a coffee for half an hour, and then go back into the fray. And this is an imagined conversation, although snippets of this did happen. This was in the 2000s. Notes on a Conversation, it's called. How can we remove the unbearable burden of the fault lines of the past? He asked. It's all in the teacher's hands, she said. Thank you, but this is impossible. As a teacher, I know. It is rather in your hands, doctors, healers, to cure the sick, the mentally deranged, that have become unteachable. And these barbarians deserve their name. They're taking over. Assassinations, executions, subtle torturings, all dressed up as something blasé, something with a spin. No, thank you. This is impossible also. We can cure what presents to us as broken, limbs, skin, fissures of bone, even perhaps a broken mind or heart. But we cannot repair that from which from birth is deranged, what was born broken. Then it is for the parents, he said, to bring good children into the world. It is for them to love in a true way and bring love out of itself for its own fulfillment, its own beauty. As the light wore down, it glimmered sideways through the trees and across the pool like the wink of an angel goddess, owl-eyed, sending her photons direct to the heart from the mystery. No, not parents. On them cannot be placed the task of lifting the unbearable burden of the failures of the past. For parents become by accident. They stumble into each other at parties. They fumble into each other prematurely and end up hating themselves and gnawing at each other's for their lost lives they have stolen from each other. And the children learn the stories of their disappointments, the looks, the shrugged shoulders, the indifference. The great blazing light of love does not always settle on them. And children do not always revere their parents, nor listen to them. As a stone hears the moving stream and is moved onwards by the waters and becomes in turn water, then it is on lovers that the burden rests. On their shoulders must this task be borne lightly. And so at last they agreed and kissed in agreement and in kissing sailed off into the sun's rays, dripping down slow like oil or chrism on a day of glory. When light becomes air, becomes peace, becomes sound, becomes touch, becomes skin, becomes flesh, becomes moisture, becomes sweat, becomes water, becomes tears, becomes blood, becomes loving. Notes on a conversation from in the 2000s. Yeah. Right, we'll finish there. Thank you. Any final comments or
No,
observations?
It's been a weird weekend. It's not finished yet, apparently. He's going for Greenland now.
Well, we hope not. We hope not, because that'll be.
According to the news, it just had an interview with the Atlantic magazine, is it?
Yeah.
While he was playing golf, of course, on his little golf course down there in Florida.
Right.
And we can't necessarily stop. Can't necessarily say that we have to stop right now. Greenland, as you know, is surrounded by Russian and Chinese ships. We need to do something important for us. Danish Prime Minister phoned him and told him to stop. Stop right now. Stop that nonsense.
Good.
Well,
Well,
we'll see.
I mean, the joke is it's part of NATO.
Yes.
I mean, this is the madness that we've got. I should also mention about Iran, which has also been kicking off this week. And whilst my sympathies are very much with people wanting genuine democracy and a more liberal democracy in Iran, I don't think that rioting in the streets and giving excuses for the regime to then clamp down and be violent is the answer. I would have thought there may be more democratic ways of using the constitution and also having some theological discussions with these mullahs, because within Shiism there's huge bandwidth for genuine democracy and genuine intellecting, the kinds of things we do in the philosophy club. I mean, if this was in Iran, you know, the Iranians are among the most highly intellectual people on the planet and have been for the last 4,000 to 5,000 years. So I think the conversations are needed rather than stone throwing and violence. So I'd say, as I said to Marty, you know, don't charge, write. I know that philosophy is one of the most eagerly read genres of literature in Iran. They publish and read more philosophy books than any other country on the planet. I'm not sure why mine haven't all been translated into Iranian. Although I was briefly a visiting lecturer at the University of Religions and Denominations in Qom. So anyway, my prayers go to the people of Iran. I hope it doesn't turn into a bloodbath, and I hope that, please, America and Israel and Britain, stay out of this. It's not your fight, it's not your issue. Don't make it one. Don't stir the hornet's nest. You know, that's where I believe in diplomacy and peaceful dialogue. And you know, it's a country that's going through its own growth cycles, and should be allowed to do that. And we should. The only thing we should offer to help with Iran is education. We should be sending in, you know, academic support, educational support. I mean, they're having difficulty economically because we've put these sanctions on them. I don't think that was just. So I think mutual prosperity would be the answer for Iran.
The worst to say is the same guy that now threatens NATO colleagues also cancelled the agreement with Iran in his last period in the White House.
Trump, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the people behind him.
He's the one. Yeah, he's the one that actually brought Iran back on the warpath. if you can call it that.
Sure. I mean, I think John Bolton was behind that as well. And I've been listening to John Bolton's memoir of his time in the White House in the first administration of Trump. I mean, I don't particularly agree with Bolton's right-wing views on world affairs, but he was an intelligent guy compared to Trump. And I just think, I mean, how's about this for an offer? I'm very happy to go to the White House. Instead of building a ballroom, build an academy, put in a big library, and I'll go and teach there for all the Congress people and the Senate and the presidents. I'd be really happy to do some lectures on world history and ethics and religious mathematics. And we can have some great, the University of the White House. We can even call it the Trump University. No problem,
Trump University too.
But, I think education is the answer. And I'm happy to do the same in Iran, by the way. I'm happy to go to the Majlis and give talks and things. Because we've got to... My dear friend, Brian Vision Dance, who was a good friend of mine, he's dead now. He used to give out leaflets at Stonehenge. He was an interesting Jewish guy who was also a Druid. And his little leaflet said, "There's nothing wrong with the world. We're just having a weird conversation." And he would give these out to people. I think that's what we should do. The world's fine. We are just having a very weird conversation. So we need to upgrade it and, make it a bit more intelligent.
Yeah, should.
Right, can I let you press the silver button then?